was used to reform. The Native Americans were seen as a problem, and education was the solution. So the first parts of that were reservation-day schools. Children would go to the schools. They were prohibited from speaking any other language but English, and they were prohibited from practicing any native spirituals. But it wasn't effective enough because the children would go back home, right back to the same culture. So the next step were reservation boarding schools. The children would go to the schools, they would stay there, and then only go home during the summer or during short holidays like Christmas. But then that also was not effective enough because parents would come and visit and would speak in the native language, so it just wasn't enough. So in 1879, Captain Richard H. Pratt started an experiment, and he established the Carlisle Indian Industrial Boarding School. He brought a number of Native American prisoners to this boarding school, had them cut their hair, change their clothing, learn and speak only English, change their names, and they were under severe military protocols. In a speech he gave in 1892, he was quoted as saying, "Kill the Indian in him and save the man." And that was exactly what he set out to do. And this picture over here shows he was a teenager, part of the Navajo tribe. And this picture here shows what he looked like before attending the school. And then this is a picture of what he looked like after a few years at the school. As you can see, there was just a drastic transformation. And there were many transformations like this. And so the Carlisle boarding school became the model structure for many boarding schools after that. And by 1902, with 25 boarding schools across 15 states and territories, there were over 25,000 Native Americans in the school. And this was very traumatic for the parents and the children. The children were being taken away at such young ages to these boarding schools and told to forget everything they know about their culture. And a lot of times, once they would leave the boarding schools and graduate, they would go home and they wouldn't remember their culture, their language, or even their names. And so there was, of course, resistance. Parents would resist by hiding their children so that they wouldn't be taken away. But these boarding schools were made mandatory, and so the U.S. Congress was very involved. And an example would be in 1893, they allowed the Bureau of Native Americans to withhold food or supplies to any Native American parents who did not enroll their children in the schools. So it was difficult to keep their children out of the schools. The students also resisted. Sometimes they would run away, and they would run miles and miles back home. And when they run away, they were hunted down and caught and brought back and severely punished. And sometimes they would have the older Native American students punish the students that ran away. Or they would form secret groups and practice their Native American spirituals or speak their language so that they would not forget what they were being taught to forget.
So the curriculum inside these boarding schools, or the basic objective is to forget culture as well, acculturation. There was an emphasis on isolating the individual from the community, from the tribe, from people who are similar to them, especially with language and cultural practices. Everything was focused onto the learning English language and just practicing that. There was a militarized schedule, as Effie mentioned, a big focus on manual labor. And I believe the only main topics that were really taught or emphasized in schools were English, and if there were some that were led by religious organizations, then religion would be taught in that curriculum as well. And then they also focus on teaching vocational skills, farming, and all that stuff. But just a nice side note, I'm pretty sure that they farmed their lives, so I'm sure they know how to farm. But, and they were government sponsored, so they received funding from the government. This is what a normal daily schedule looked like. It was hard to find what the actual schedule was, but this is the general of what they were talking about on the website that we were looking at. You'd wake up at 5:45 in the morning, breakfast, then you'd have your vocational training, industrial work, and then at 9 is when you'll start your formal schooling, lunch, and then more training, industrial work. Then you have your evening lectures. finally lights out at 9, and throughout that time you don't have much, or you don't have, or very limited free time to just be amongst yourselves or amongst your people, and I'm pretty sure that's so that they can limit language and cultural practices. These are some of the testimonies that were found on this website with people who were in these boarding schools. The map on your left-hand side is referring back to what FA mentioned, that first boarding school where students were moved from Pine Ridge, South Dakota, I believe, out into Pennsylvania. So that's a far separation. One of the testimony, I'm just going to paraphrase it. The long hair was the pride of all Indians. The boys, one by one, would break down and cry when they saw their braids thrown on the floor. It goes further to say, talks about the loneliness. Boys ran away from school because the treatment was so bad, and both of them were caught and brought back by the police. Another one was from a student who would graduate from these boarding schools to become a teacher, and she mentioned that, did I want to be an Indian? After looking at the pictures of the Indians on the war path, fighting, scalping women and children, oh, such ugly faces. No, Indians were mean people. I'm glad I'm not an Indian, I thought. So those are the kind of things that were taught in the school.
So the current situation, most of the Native American boarding schools have been shut down. Many of the schools who had these practices of child labor, they've already been eliminated. The U.S., as of this point, has not acknowledged its role formally in the establishment of these boarding schools, where these kids were worked, and they were really hard, and they were trying to take away the culture from the kids, and so there's still long-term effects that have been seen. In one of the reflection papers, I think for this week, there was a series of videos that talked about adverse childhood experiences, and so these experiences have had long-term effects on these kids, like Sophie mentioned in those quotes. Now, there are some current boarding schools that are around, and so I just want to go through two examples of boarding schools that are still in running today, but their philosophies have changed drastically. The first one, there's none in Minnesota, still currently going. So we're traveling over to Salem, Oregon, to Chemawa Indian School. It's a private boarding school for grades 9 through 12, so it's a high school. Part of their philosophy is that they integrate technology into their education. So in 2012, they had introduced iPads to all of the kids at the school. They've got smart boards in their classroom, and so they're really integrating technology into their instruction. Chemawa Indian School is run by the Bureau of Indian Education in Salem, Oregon, and they will attract students from all over the western half of the United States, from states such as Arizona and Alaska, California, even as far inland as Montana. They'll attract students from those states. At the school, they emphasize the importance of teaching students how to practice their own traditions. And they invite students to bring in the traditions that they've been taught in their tribes. They also will teach students some other traditions. So the students will learn how to drum, and they will have powwow traditions that they keep alive at the school. Instead of glossing over it like they did in the past, trying to shut it down, they embrace it, which is really great for those students. Also at Chemawa, they have a partnership program with, I forget what it's called, Williamette University. And at Williamette University, these college students come into the school and they do activities with high schoolers. They'll have events together. The students will put on cultural events for the community around them. And so that community has really embraced the school, and they're attracting people from other schools. In this partnership program with Williamette, they've invited college students to come in and to have tutoring services for the kids. They'll come into the admin classroom and work with those students. So it gives the students a chance to look ahead. They work with college students that are looking ahead to college, to university. Many of the instructors have a passion for helping their kids get scholarships. And one of the testimonies I read on their school website was that a young student saying, I feel like my teachers are working really, really hard to get me into a good college, to get me the scholarships I need so I can afford to go into higher education. Another Indian high school, this one is in Riverside, California, Sherman Indian High School. I was reading through the philosophy statements, and this one just caught my eye. The philosophy statement of the school is that Sherman Indian High School will provide a safe, caring environment in which a balanced program will foster the academic, the social, cultural, physical, and spiritual growth of a diverse population of American people. Not all of these students coming into this school have the same backgrounds. They do have different beliefs, and so the bottom line of this school is to, it was interesting how they worded it, to produce a good human being. But what they're doing is they're cultivating the growth of the whole person, not just academic, not just religious, not just cultural, but the entire person. I just had one more note before we move into impact on us as teachers. In Minnesota, there was a Indian boarding school, Pipestone Indian School, in Pipestone, Minnesota. I'm not really sure where that is.
It's southern Missouri.
Is it southern?
There.
Okay, perfect, thanks. This school was built in 1907, and it was run at the time when there was the most students. It could hold about 400 students. There were 60 buildings as part of campus. It attracted students from tribes such as the Dakota tribe, the Oneida tribe, the Sac, and the Fox tribes. After they started shutting these schools down, this school ended up being bought out by Southwestern Vocational Technical Institute and is now owned by the Minnesota West Community College. It's not open to the public, but there's one building left, which actually used to be the superintendent's house. Okay, so moving on to impact on me, on us as teachers. Thinking about these boarding schools as affecting the entire person, and affecting the spiritual and cultural and emotional and educational growth of the student, I'm reminded of the foreign exchange students that we get in our school. I teach in a very small school south of the Twin Cities in Farmington, and there's not a whole lot of diversity in terms of race and culture, but we do attract a lot of foreign exchange students. And one thing I noticed a couple months ago, we have a company called Koen who invites these students to come over and learn in an American school, and to make the students feel more at home. She'll come at lunchtime occasionally and bring food that they used to eat back in Korea. So sushi and other types of dishes. And so she has a really integral role in fostering the growth of the whole person. Even though these students come from Korea and they want to learn English, they want to learn the language, and learn more about American culture, they also are given the opportunity to not forget where they were before.
For me as a teacher, one thing that I learned while researching about boarding schools was just how powerful education is in general, and how as a teacher I have been given a huge responsibility to either empower my students or to continue in, accepting whatever oppressions there are in society. And so that was definitely something I learned. Learning about this, my role as a teacher, how important it is, and how much responsibility I have.
And thank you for me along the line of essay. I think that sometimes we do in a nation where we get free education, or when we choose the free education, we kind of take it for granted, and we don't really think that it's something that is a how powerful it is when people actually want it. They'll do anything for it, like send their kids tens of thousands of miles away, or let them live in whatever conditions they can. And so, as a teacher, I've learned to appreciate education on a different level now.
Great, thank you. Questions? I have a couple. Go ahead.
When did the majority of the boarding schools get closed down?
Around, I would say, like the 1920s.
That was about the 1940s, but I couldn't.
Yeah, like in between there.
So just a point of clarification. The boarding schools were not a voluntary system. So Indian families were not sending their kids off because they wanted to give them the white man's education. I wanted that to be crystal clear. They were kidnapped from their parents, tricked in some cases. Babies would be born, and doctors would say, your baby died, but take the baby to a boarding school or send the baby off to an adoption. So the systematic process of genocide on Native Americans was not a voluntary thing. And so when you have students in your classroom and they're not really interested in this education system, you might have some reasons why their family lore would not say that this is an educational system that we really want to be a part of. The other part is our educational system is not free. We do not have free education, do we? We pay it in taxes. And one of the mindsets that people have, which is why some of you as teachers won't get the kind of respect that you deserve, is because people have that mindset that you're just a teacher, or that you're in a public school, so you obviously, are living off the lamb and that kind of stuff. But it's taxpayers' money. And so that's why unions are important for teachers, because it's taxpayers' monies. And so when the taxpayers say, I want this, sometimes these unions are able to say, whoa, wait a minute, let's talk about this before we just make this thing. So thank you so much. Good job. Good job. Good job. All right. Who is next? Amanda and Jen. And I did want to get some clarity on our ground rules in terms of time. We did say that we would give each group 15 minutes, yes? 20 minutes?
15 to 20.
Yeah, that's what we said, 15, 20, right? So just make sure we're sticking with that so we can get through. No, you're fine. You're fine. Yeah, I don't rebuke people. I just try to help us remember.